Welcome everyone. I'd like to welcome all the attendees on the 6th episode of Oro Tech Talks. My name is Maciej Garycki. I'm a senior developer here at Oro, as well as a technical team lead. And I'll be running this presentation for you today. And our topic will be developing Oro extensions. But before we kick in, let me pass the word to my teammate Anna from the marketing team for a couple of announcements.
Thank you, Maciek. Hi, everyone. My name is Anna Kolich. I'm Director of Marketing here at Oro, and I'll just take a quick moment of your time to make a few announcements. So first of all, I would really encourage everyone not to miss our release candidate demo that we're holding on March the 22nd. Julia has sent a link in the chat, so please make sure you sign up and you join. It will be a great opportunity for you to have an early preview of all the long-term support features that are soon going to be released with long-term support version 5.1 of Oro. And also, you will be able to ask any questions directly to people in charge of the product, LVP on engineering, Michael Bassel. Another thing that I would want to bring up is really thank everyone who's been involved and provided feedback when we asked for it and when we didn't for Oro Tech Talks. I'm hoping you're taking notice, right, that we are taking your feedback into consideration and we are improving based on it. That's basically today's topic, right? This was one of the suggestions that our community made, and the next one is actually also going to be based on the feedback that we got. It's going to be about zero downtime deployment strategies. So that said, please keep it going. We are looking forward to more feedback, to more ideas, and yeah, you can send them into chat here. You can send it in our Slack channel, or to our marketing email, marketing@oroinc.com. But on top of that, this year, we would want to take it a little bit further, right? And we would want to give you the opportunity to also speak at Oro Tech Talks, because we do know that our community sometimes might have more expertise in implementations of Oro products, and sometimes you guys are so instrumental creating something new on top of our platform. And we would like to give you an opportunity to share anything exciting, anything worthy of sharing with the community during the Tech Talk. So please, if you have any interesting topics, any best practices that you found during your work with Oro, don't hesitate to reach out, and we can discuss how we can kind of give you a little bit of a spotlight. Thank you so much, and I'm passing back to Maciej.
Thanks, Anna. So let's then jump into our topic today. So let's go through the agenda first. I'm going to talk through a couple of points. So first of all, some theory and where the idea of extension is placed in context of Oro. Then I'm going to walk through the approach of how to wrap up the extension with a focus on a standalone solution. Then I'll give a couple of examples from the development perspective. I have chosen 5 most Oro-related things like configuration, entities, layout basics, data grids, and workflows, plus some examples. Please treat that as like some general examples regarding Oro development, but I'll try to keep it with a focus placed on the extension approach. Then we're going to talk over some coding best practices when dealing with the extension approach. And at the end, I think everyone likes to get stuff for free. I'm going to provide some free extensions to all of the participants. There are going to be 2 extensions. I'm going to take them over. So the idea of extension. Let's first dive into a little bit of theory. So compiled from multiple sources, a shortest possible definition of extension in context of software computer programming is an extension is a computer program that's able to run on top of another computer program and extend its functionality. In terms of scripting languages, basically in terms of PHP and Oro, it's a pack of or package of additional scripts, classes that extend and modify the original logic, provided the base application code. So in our case, it's Oro core. It's not standalone, so it cannot run by itself. It needs the original code base, the core code base to work with, and maybe project specific, because technically speaking, anything that you develop for clients specifically and place it in your source code in context of Symfony application is also an extension, because you are technically extending the basic functionality for our core. But for the sake of this presentation and the whole topic, we'll be focusing on the portable solution. And very important part. Last but not least, it uses extension points that are left in the original code base and allow the extending of the code and modifying the existing implementation. These are the extensions points provided by developers, but if there is no extension points, Symfony, as Oro is a Symfony-based software, leaves some things to play with and extend the original logic by the Symfony dependency injection component itself. How to approach, I will speak about it later. So the idea of extension, what are the extensions in Oro that are most popular? What do people tend to extend in Oro? An example, pretty much every logic can be extended by extension, every part of the logic, but people mostly focus on the payment and shipping methods. They customize checkouts. We have two built-in checkouts, single page checkout and regular multi-step checkout. Both are modified. Also, new implementations of checkout are being implemented in form of extensions. Third-party service integrations, so that's maybe CRM, PIM, or like, I don't know, warehousing, inventory management. Also, a lot of search UI and functionality enhancements are being added via extensions. For example, like custom boosting or additional ordering. So like recently, I've been dealing with an extension that places out of stock products always at the bottom, like on the PLP, at the last pages of the PLP. Also, back office can be extended in many ways. I've seen chat implementations, standalone or third-party based, third-party services based, custom business models, workflows, etc. So anything, any part of the customization which is portable may become an extension. When to use the extension. So let's start from the last part, because I think this is the most important. First of all, you have to have time and money to implement an extension, because this is an investment. This is a decision made by your organization, by your management, to invest into something that it will cost some time initially, but later it will bring benefits. So basically, when you have a situation that you reuse some piece of logic across multiple projects by copying, pasting, searching for that functionality, and very often not even changing the content to be business domain specific, then you may consider that this part, this reusable part, can become a baseline for an extension. So putting some effort into making it portable, you may end up having an extension that brings a lot of profits that I will list in the next slide. So the profits of using that are that the extension overall is time saving, and all the other points are pretty much like should be sub points of the first one of the time saving, because initially you invest into extending, into creating an extension, but then it increases maintainability because this part of code that you'll be wrapping up into an extension is only placed into one code into one place, and you can maintain it, fix issues related with it. Each fix can be tagged, so you have tagging and versioning, and then redistributed along your projects you work with that has that bug, has been dealing with that bug, without actually having to copy paste the code into multiple places. And also, apart from that, it also provides the ease of further extending functionality. If you wrap it into if you wrap the functionality into an extension, if you put it on some repository and write dedicated tests, then you may grow some community around it, internal in your company or external if you decide to put it open to the world. And yeah, more brains, more developers can provide good ideas, and the functionality of the extension may grow. So what is the approach for an extension in Oro? Well, Oro is a Symfony application, so it inherits not only the benefits of coding and the tools provided by Symfony, the code base, it also inherits the way we pack stuff into packages, so bundling. So an extension in Oro is preferably a composer package with a versioning system placed into a repository. You may optionally want to use a package server. A good example for Symfony project's packaging server is a packagist.org, but you may have also a packaging server on your own inside your organization. There's a lot of existing Symfony repositories on and Oro repositories on GitHub available for free. And in general, this is the easiest way of storing an extension. Personally, I can't figure out any other way for maintaining an extension than storing it into a versioning system and just maintaining that by that. Just keep in mind that a bundle does not equal an extension, but it's easy to maintain an extension in form of a bundle in general in Symfony projects. Now we're going to go through a couple of examples. As I said, these are going to be examples of the 5 elements of Oro that I decided to talk over. They are not strictly related with extension approach, but I'll try to focus on this approach when showing them off. So first example, configuration. What's the best way to act with when dealing with configuration and Oro extensions? So first of all, always choose the lowest effort path. The configuration is a native Symfony functionality defined in YAML files and DI services files. Oro extends it, and Oro provides a nice UI for configuration. Let me find a. So yes, this is the Oro configuration panel for defining certain settings. This is built on top of the native Oro configuration. You can see that there are a lot of sections and within the sections you have subsections and fields at the very bottom. So it's pretty fancy looking thing based on a simple like text file driven component. So what is the best way to achieve things, some logic changes that can be done during using configuration? So basically, if you take the approach for an extension, you should focus on figuring out if it's possible to write the smallest amount of code. So the more you can change with a simple configuration change, either by changing YAML files or by changing the configuration using the UI, the better. So if the requirement can be fulfilled by YAML only, please approach. If not, then check if the requirement can be changed by using writing a fixture or changing defining your own configuration. Then please go on, and as the last final step, you write the code. So an example here: after logging in, the customer user must be redirected to an account page. So by default, Oro redirects customer user after logging in to the home page. And the first thing that comes to mind is event listener. Personally, I always also like wrote a listener. You just listen to some post login event, and you take the response, change it into a redirect response, set a root or a URL, and you're done, because the application will redirect the person to the URL. But it's actually easier to simply override the setting for a firewall, security firewall for the front end, and set the default target path to our customer front end customer user profile. So adding this snippet of code in the YAML file, in this case, this is my extensions app YAML file. It will override the value for the default value for the target path after login, and the outcome is that if you log into the system, Manda, then still logging in. Yeah, there we go. We've got the My Profile page. So the requirement has been fulfilled, and I have not written a single line of PHP code. The only thing I've changed is the configuration. So another example is some password length. The requirement is that the password length must be increased to 10 characters, and the password must contain upper, lowercase letters, numbers, and all of that. So we could change that using either a fixture. So you have that situation on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, you have a situation when you change these values using a configuration. There is a difference between these two approaches. You'll see that on the next slide, because the fixture will change the values as if they were overridden using the UI. So take a look here. The default checkbox is unticked, so it's not using the default value. But here on the right, on the left-hand side, you can see that the default value of the application itself has been overridden. So this is basically the difference between these two approaches. And that's it related with the examples of the configuration. And then we are moving to the entities. So the entities in Oro are, I think, the most widely used part, because they're like a standard part of any programming. So Oro uses doctrine entities, so a standard approach with the annotations. And when extending Oro and writing your extensions, the preferred way of using declaring doctrine entities is the default plain old doctrine version of the entity. But apart from that, Oro provides entity extend functionality, which is a fancy functionality, and it's handy for things like enums, or if you want to store the fields without creating database tables. Database columns, so in form of a serialized fields, or if you want to use the benefits of Oro, data grids, layouts in the admin panel, view and form, and so on and so on, then you simply use the Oro options key in the migration you're making, and you have to extend a certain model. I'll just give an example in a second. And you end up having the ability to use the extend extension. It saves time quite often, but it also generates a lots of additional code in the cache. And it also generates it impacts performance a bit. So still the first approach is preferable. But for example, if you want to know the Oro entity to be aware of the entities that you define in your extension, then you need to use the extend entities extension. Let's take a look at an example. First, we have a requirement to extend an Oro customer user. So we have some random integration, ACME integration. It requires synchronizing of each registered customer user with a third-party ACME CRM, whatever. So a synchronized customer receives flag yes, and non-synchronized customer receives flag no. So that's it. We just add one column to the table Oro customer user, but since we're doing that from an extension, and the Oro originally is customer user is originally is a Oro core entity, then we are using the extension Oro options and the extension functionality to define the values for this field, so it automatically can become part of the data grids, of the view, of the form, and so on and so on. So here's an example of how we do that. There's this magic Oro options array key for the doctrine options of this field. The rest remains the same. There's Oro options, and we provide the extend is extend true. That means that we use the extend functionality, and there's this owner scope, owner custom, which means that all the automatic UI control will be applied. There's another type of scope, but I'm not going to cover it here. Then we have that information that is displayable on the view, so we don't have to care about the layouts and so on and so on. Any twig, it's going to be visible in the customer user page in the admin. In the data grid, by default visible hidden. It's going to be also be rendered on the form. So this is the approach, and another example. Well, here's an example of what it actually generates under the hood. So under the hood, it generates some getter and setter and the property itself within a proxy class that whenever you instantiate the customer user entity, this entity will have that getter and setter and the property available as if they were part of the native Oro core entity. So as another example, I've created a very small entity called customer user activity, and it's an activity that needs to be tracked whenever somebody enters a page. So whenever a customer user enters a page, it will create a record of that. Whatever the purpose doesn't actually matter here. What matters here is the structure and the awareness of the entity about the customer user. So in this example, we will have the entity be aware of the customer user if we define it within the entity, but the customer user entity will not be aware of these items. So each of customer users will not be aware of its activities records. But in this case, we need to modify it so that each customer user entity must be aware of the activity records, and the customer user entity must have this get activity records method. So we have to use an entity extend extension, and we have a method to add many to one relation and the other way around to define an inverse relation. So we execute that method on our record and let it know that we will have a property called customer user, and we will also let the customer user know that we will have a property activity records. And then if you go to just a second, if you go to the management for the entities, entity management, and you check for customer user, okay. All right. So you can see that the customer user entity will have the property activity records. So this property is available via this setter and via this getter. So at this point, anytime you instantiate customer user entity, you will be able to get the activity records of that customer user. So this is the difference. If we picked up the previous example, our custom entity would be aware of the customer user, but not the other way around. So we would not be able to execute this method on the customer user. So this was the example related with the entities. And I'm going to just briefly cover the layouts, because layouts are so complex and big that they can become like part for another talk. So I'll just briefly tell you a couple of words of that. The layouts are responsible for the front end, and they are defined. They define building blocks of the page. They are built on top of Twig, so you will still be working with the Twig HTML Twig files to define the HTML output for the layout blocks. And they allow to they're YAML based in terms of configuration, and they allow to modify a structure of the page, adding, removing, wrapping around one blocks with another into containers, moving around the core blocks, removing them, adding custom variables to these blocks, defining your own blocks and adding adding variables to them. There are different types of blocks, etc., etc. The data that's provided to the blocks, it can be either passed to the blocks in the definition, or it can be inherited, or it can be provided by data providers. So each time you'll see in our application a service that's tagged layout data provider, that means that there's a service which you can call in your YAML definition for the layout by the alias, and use its methods in the YAML definition of the action for the layout to get the data from it. So we have an example here. So let's reuse the example from the entities. We need to display somehow the information about the synchronization with ACME. So we defined three parts here. One part is the definition of the layout. The definition is the YAML file. It is placed or inside the inside some special directory, which I'm gonna speak about just in a moment. And we have a third file that defines the overridden block, so that this is like a tweak block, which we have customized by displaying the Acme is synchronized. So basically, the requirement is to display this field on the profile page. And how did I figure out how to structure the thing? So I went to the customer, to the profile page, customer user profile page, and I figured out that the whole page root is Oro customer frontend customer user profile. So if you read the documentation, get to through the documentation, play around with it, you'll find out that the way to apply certain blocks within the layouts engine is you can bind it to certain root. And the way to do that is actually inside your template layout, you create a folder with the same name as the root, and then whatever YAML file you place into it, it will be picked up by the templating engine, by the layout engine, and it will apply these rules that are defined in this file. So in this case, this is very simple because we only set a custom template to be a block theme, and what I actually needed to do is I needed to place this information, which you can see is already showing here. So how I found it out? So I needed to find a block that controls this part. So I checked the structure of the page. Then I went to the admin panel configuration. There's a very fancy tool built into Oro. If you are in the dev mode, you need to be in the dev mode, and you search for developers, development settings. When you set this value, include block debug info into HTML to yes, and save the configuration, you end up having additional information for each block that's specified in the markup of the page. So you can see that I figured out that this is the part that I need to overwrite, because this is the closest wrapper to my place where I wanted to place this indicator, and I figured out this is the name of it. As you can see, the template is already using my custom value, custom template from my extension, but originally it was using a different template. So the next thing I just needed to do is I needed to figure it out in the code. So I searched for it, and I found it out that it's directory vendor, that it's here. Next steps which I did is I copied this block, so minimize, copy, and I pasted it into my decorated theme. So I placed it here, and the only thing I did is I added the customization to display the is synced, is synchronized. If the value is Boolean value is yes, it will display yes. If it's false, it will display no. And that's it. That's pretty straightforward, although this example is straightforward, but the layouts themselves are not that straightforward. But they're definitely worth checking, because once you get into it and get some practice, that's a very handy tool. And that's it for the layouts, for the example of layouts. Now I'm going to focus on the data grids. The data grids are a very common pattern, a very common tool used in pretty much every admin panel you can imagine in any software that works on in a browser, and not only browser. In Oro, it's designed in a very fancy way. So it's both used in the back office admin and front end. It uses data grids YAML file and works over multiple events, define multiple events as an extension points, that really helps and allows the modification of data grid very much. This is one of the most flexible components in Oro, and really a pleasure to work with. It also can have multiple sources, ORM, Elasticsearch, or array. Depending on that, some of the events may change. So for example, here, there's a set of events available for the ORM, but if in the case of Elasticsearch, if you some of the events will be named differently, like for example, ORM data source will change to search data source, and so on. So please keep that in mind. But other than that, the way you overwrite is the same. So a couple of words of good practices. How do we extend the default data grids, and how do we define data grids in our extensions? So first of all, we focus on writing as much as possible in data grids YAML file. So the data grids YAML file is the YAML that defines the data grids, and we can both extend or inherit from the existing data grids. If we extend an existing data grid, we simply write definitions for the same data grids in multiple bundles, in multiple extensions. Also, if we want to exchange something with an existing data grid, we define the data grids YAML in our extension, and we do the modifications of the existing core data grid. The files will be merged according to the priorities of loading of the bundles, and they will be merged together into one array of configuration. Some things cannot be accomplished by data grids YAML, and in this case, we want to focus on the listeners. For example, if we want to remove some joins, remove some where parameters, and so on, we then need to use the event listeners to modify that, because data grids only allow to add some conditions, not to remove them. So, but it's pretty straightforward also to work with the listeners, because you're usually receiving a big array that you modify. And in the example, we have a definition of a custom data grid that's about to work exactly the same as the product select data grid base from the core, and it also only sets the product type to be simple, so only simple products will be shown on that data grid. As an example, recently I faced this example that some extension was defining it by some listeners trying to define it by JavaScript. Basically, you can the requirement is that product listing page design requires 4 products. So we have some designer prepared the layout for 4 products in a row, and that's why he decided that the paging must be 12, 24, and 52, by default 52. And the way to approach it is simply to modify the configuration of toolbar options of the existing front-end product search grid, because this is the PLP grid. So in this case, we have this value specified in my application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check if we actually have this values updated. That could have been done without YAML. That could have been done with some configuration changes, but it's not worth doing that. Okay, so we've got 52 by default. We've got 12, 24, and that's it. So the requirement has been fulfilled. Okay, another requirement, this one will involve the listener. We've got a onBuildBefore event. OnBuildBefore is executed before we actually have the configuration already built. And what we need to do is we have to change the filters that are of type text, the text search filters, and modify contains text. Actually, how Oro behaves natively. Let me switch to proper source code. How Oro natively behaves is it shows with the text filters, it shows multiple options here so that you can filter by contains, does not contain, filter by skew, it does not contain, is equal to, etc., etc. The thing we want to do is we want to make it only contain here. Yes. So I've written a quick listener. It iterates over all the filters available in the system, checks if the type of the filter is string, and overrides the operator choices of this filter only to have one single operator, and changes the configuration back with the new values for the filters. So once we save it, the outcome should be that we'll have only one option in the dropdown, the contains option. It takes some time. I think Zoom has made my whole machine very slow. And okay, so we've got the filters, and we've got only the contains filter in all of the text fields. So this time with the listener, the requirement has been fulfilled. Now we're leaving the data grids in favor of one of the most complex topics in Oro, in favor of the workflows. Workflows. What's a workflow? It's easier, I think, to describe what it does than what it is. So workflow defines a set of steps of process that modifies states of involved subject objects for initial to one of final states. So in easier words, if we have a set of objects, then we perform a set of actions one by one. These actions are transitions from one state of the object to another. And then we have one starting point, one state at the beginning, but we may have multiple states at the end. So once the object has reached the final state, it means that it has fulfilled the workflow, and the workflow's job here is done. Oro in the application defines a lot of workflows. The most famous one are pretty much, I think the most important ones are the checkout workflows. So B2B flow checkout, so regular checkout with steps, and B2B flow checkout single page, checkout on a single page. Apart from that, we have opportunity workflow, quote workflow, and a couple of others, but this is not very important because we will be focusing on the checkout workflow, as this is the most modified most modified workflow, and also the most heavily used in extensions. So now, first, an important note: how do we create a workflow and move it to our extension when we want to overwrite an existing workflow and check out a couple of things in it? So this is one of the most often asked questions. And this is one of the things that provides a headache to our partners. That's why I decided to go through with it and make it maybe just a little bit easier. So first I need to find the proper code base. Then we are looking for the checkout bundle. Checkout bundle contains both of the checkout workflows. These checkout workflows are placed in the resources config Oro workflows directory. And we have two checkout workflow files, so B2B flow checkout single page and the regular checkout here. As you can see, these are using the files that are in the includes, and in each of the directories that's named the same way as the YAML file. So what if you want to copy the single checkout, you copy the original file includes and the single page one, and you place it in your directory in your extension. If you want to modify the regular flow checkout, you copy these three directories. Once you move it, this is very important. Rename the checkout workflow and give it a unique name. So in my case, this is going to be Acme checkout, Acme flow checkout, and rename all the values here in the workflow. So these files will be applied to this Acme flow checkouts to you, so to your custom checkouts. But the very important part to do is to get back to the workflow and make it active false. This is because this workflow, any checkout workflow, has restrictions. There can be only one checkout workflow executed, and the restrictions are defined here. So each of the checkout workflows belongs to this active group and active exclusive record group, B2B checkout flow. So we need to make it inactive so that the application will read the workflow, but will not have any conflict with the active workflows. So this is done. We have the workflow renamed. We have all the values changed within these files. We have it inactive. Then what we do now is we run PHP bin console or workflow definitions load. That will load our workflow, but it will keep it inactive. And then what we do is we need to write a fixture that will activate our workflow. And the fixture is written here. What it does is it takes the workflow manager, grabs the existing workflows that we want to turn off, resets them and deactivates them, and only then after it's done, it activates our workflow. And the outcome will be that that the workflow should be available. Just a second. All right, so we've got the Acme checkout workflow active, yes, and other workflows are not active currently. So the workflow was these workflows were deactivated by the fixture, and only by then our workflow has been activated. Yes, so this is the way to achieve that. And also remember, whenever you do changes in your workflow, reload the workflow using that command, because if the change is made, it doesn't matter, it will be reflected on the page, because the workflow needs to be reloaded to the database for the application to work with. And we have a short example of a workflow modification. So we have a business need. When starting checkout from a shopping list, if customer reaches $3,000, he should see flash warning message informing him about the fact on the billing information step. So a warning message should be shown if we have a lot of products for a lot of money, worthing a lot of money in our cart, in our shopping list. So what I actually did here is as I set up my custom workflow, I copied over the workflow here, and I went to the start from shopping list definition for the transition, and I added a service method call to my custom provider, which I defined. I stored the value in a custom property, and then I've added a flash message under condition when my result total stored in that variable was greater or equal to 3,000, and then I just show the message. So how it looks in the code? In the code, no, sorry. In the code, this is my customization. I had to define a custom provider, a total provider, which was defined in my service YAML. By default, the service was private, so I made a public alias available under such string, and this is why I could use it within my YAML. So as you can see, the YAML definitions of the transition methods, it's just a series of procedures that one by one will need to be executed. What I actually did to the original one, I just added 2 methods with 1 condition, and that's it. So let's see the outcome. Okay, yeah, so I already showed the outcome. You reach a threshold of $3,000. So yes, so basically when you get back, it should show again. All right, so we get a shopping list worth 3,000. We add the order. Yes, you have reached the threshold of $3,000. So our requirement was fulfilled. All right, so now let's briefly review the best coding practices, of course, in terms of dealing with extensions. So 3 things to get in mind is as much you can reuse. You need to allow extending of code yourself and avoid overwriting of code. So first, reuse as much as possible. So if you're exploring the architecture and the business needs for an extension, please figure out if you don't have something similar already written and existing in Oro from Oro extensions, or from Symfony bundles. If you don't have the functionality available, please take a look if you can find parts of it within existing Symfony bundles. There's a lot of Symfony bundles in the market. There's a lot of Oro extensions also available. So each of them can become a dependency of your extension, or like a base for it to extend in the future, to extend in your extension. Also, reuse the Symfony tools that are available, so or extend entities, Symfony form extensions, Symfony form validation, and ACL. ACL is the access rights management, and it's very abused often, because within extensions, instead of using properly ACL, which is only extended by Oro, but it's part of a Symfony ecosystem, people tend to define configuration files with a checkbox if a customer user has access to something. And this is a bad practice, because instead of using a configuration, which of course it will work, but it's not the way that it's not the case it's created for. You can use ACL and define proper access right. You can check if given customer or user has access right to this ACL, and it's gonna work even better. Other best practice extension points. Many of you have probably figured out that there are some points in Oro that are hard to extend due to private properties and methods, and it's frustrating, because usually when you deal with something like this, you end up having to use the extension points only on the dependency injection level. So the outcome is that you copy paste the code of the original class, you extend it within your class, and then you just change like a couple of lines of code, and then the code redundancy grows. So you don't like it, so do not act the same way. So if you don't like it while writing your extensions, please consider the fact that your extension may be a base for another extension, and somebody may want to reuse your code too. So the better dependencies you define, the more events you use in your code, and the more protected methods, of course, you have to be smart with that, you define, the less miserable life will be of the person that has to write his extensions basing on your code. So this is like a very important part. And also, I'm also mentioned the common coding best practices like solid or don't repeat yourself or whatever. So I'm not gonna cover that here, but yeah, these practices also apply. And another last but not least important part is the checking of coding standards. Here on the example, you've got a PHP CS fixer. It's a tool that tries to fix code style issues for yourself. Is available in Symfony applications. It's available in Oro. You may also consider incorporating that into your continuous integration, continuous build practices into your services. And apart from CS Fixer, you have PHP CS or mess detector, which will check the structure of your code, the redundancy. This is also worth considering for using. The more of these tools you have, and the more your extension code will be clear, easy to extend, flexible, maintainable, and nice to work with. And this is something we all want to achieve. So rule number 3, decoration over inheritance. If you have services in Oro, decorate them if it's possible to decorate them. If you can't decorate it, extend it, but try to override only the parts that are that you need to change the code in. So do not copy all the class just as is and just modify your one line. If you have a situation that there's no extension points and all the methods are private and all the properties are private, well, this is the case where you have to actually do it, but try to avoid it. And the last part, if you cannot extend, then you overwrite. This example is a simple example of a decorator for payment status provider. The decorator implements the same interface. It takes the original payment service provider as a dependency. It provides the same public method, takes the original method, takes the original outcome of this method and translates it using some random translator. I'm not going to get into this, but this is a good example of a very short decorator that decorates one single public method and implements the interface properly. Now, something that everyone likes. So takeaways. The takeaways are going to be like 2 extensions. For now, please remember that we have an Aurora extension portal where you can find existing extensions. You can filter them by product, by supported LTE, LTS version, and category. If you're looking for implementing something, some payment method or shipment method, there's a probability that somebody already did that, and you can sometimes obtain it even for free because there is a lot of free extensions on the market on this portal. But also for a small amount of money, you also can obtain the extension. This way, saving your company and yourself time and money. Or if it doesn't fit your needs, it may also become a base for your extension that you'll be developing. Yes, so finally, these extensions for free, which are going to be sent to you in the postmortem in a letter after this presentation, is the seller dashboard extension and front store filter improvements. The seller dashboard is a nice looking seller widget. Let me find where I have it. Dashboard, seller dashboard. So this is how it looks. This is how it looks for real. It provides a split of the values by time period, so month, year to day. You can define your own time periods easily with the code. You can extend these data providers for these widgets. You can define your own widgets because the code is pretty easy to extend. So this is a very good candidate to become your base for your extensions to fit your needs. Another extension which we're going to provide, we took a lot of feedback from our partners and from our clients. We had a lot of modifications related with the front store filters, and this extension gathers them all together and makes life easier for developers. So instead of having to modify the code yourself, you are having an extension with everything configurable in a configuration section. So apart from making the developer's life easy, it, for example, allows prioritization of filters, category, alt text, price filter, and also each searchable attribute filter by define a priority for it. It limits the number of filters to the most accurate ones. So if you do a general search for a very general world, you usually may end up with like 20 filters provided from Elasticsearch, but you may define the number that you want to show. And so 6 most accurate will show. Also, you have this you have these filters for the enumerable values, and the search box may be annoying because only if you have only 2 values to select, the search box doesn't actually apply. So you can turn it off using that extension. Also, please be aware that we are providing this extension in the latest stable version for railroad. So that's like 5.0.8, I think. So this is provided as is. You can do whatever you want with it. You can place it in your repository. You can use it, modify it, but we don't give any variety for the extensions that we'll provide after that presentation. All right. So I would like to thank you for being patient and listening to me. I hope that you liked the presentation, and I'm open to any questions. Do you have any questions now? All right, so I don't think anyone has questions for the moment, or at least I cannot hear any. Okay, just a second. Okay, I think we have questions. Yeah, we do have questions now. Okay, we have a questions here. What are some good monetization-wise ideas for an extension would you recommend to build and put on the marketplace? Something that our customers ask for often, but Orcar does not plan to implement anytime soon. Well, this is a very good question. Thanks, Jan. Actually, there's nothing that comes to my mind, but I can only tell you that there are often questions about various payment methods that are like niche payment methods that are used on some markets, but they're not actually big enough, so they reached the point when there's a lot of extensions for various systems with them. So yeah, maybe the payment method would be an idea, or what I can tell you what I would need. I would need a good chat integration, preferably Oracle based. So built on our core, but without third-party application. So that would be something I would need, and the clients are asking me about. We do not have it currently. So other than that, I don't actually know if I don't have any ideas that come to my mind right now. So I'm gonna. Did this answer like your question? Okay, Jan, did this answer the question?
Yeah, of course. I thought I will be not able to speak, but thanks for letting me.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have like some delay due to the Zoom being very like a lazy, laggy. So I thought also I'll not be able to allow you to speak, but yeah, we have another participant. Hello, Yaro.
Hi, just to clarify, are these extensions provided by you available in Oro Store?
These extensions that I'm going to give you are not available in Oro Store. They're not.
Okay.
They're our internal extensions.
Okay.
So you won't find it there.
Okay, because I just already looked and didn't see. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got another questions from Justin. All right. In the checkout YAM, how could I return to shopping list page if an error occurs? So in the checkout YAM, how could I return to shopping list page if an error occurs? Yes. So basically, there are multiple ways, but if you define your YAML file, so if you define your workflow that handling the layouts, the errors, so that your service will handle an error and provide a response, then you can use a condition and write a redirect to a given step or transition back to given step with providing some message in the context, so that if this message is available in the context, it will show as an error on the page. So this is usually how I do it. Okay, Justin, did I answer?
Hello.
Hello. Hi.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I think I try to redirect, but because I need to redirect from the multiple initial. You can initial from a shopping list or from a quick order. I need something that could be dynamic.
I understand. Well, that's something that I would need to play with, but in general, the checkout is aware of the source of itself. So it contains the information about the source entity and source entity ID. So once you have the error, you can define yet another set of conditions, and basing on that for conditions, you redirect to given page.
Yeah.
I think that's the way I would approach it.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go further through the questions. I don't see any further questions. Okay, so this is This is answered. All right. Okay. What's the simplest way to share a private extension? With a private extension, I think that to be honest, I'm not aware exactly how the mechanism works. So with that, you would probably need to contact Anna or contact Julia from our marketing team. Well, basically, contact our marketing team, and they will lead you through. If you have such extension, they will lead you through and allow you to place the extension on the market. So I'm not competent enough to know the exact steps of how it actually works. Okay. Christian, did it answer the question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. So thank you very much, all. I don't think we have enough time for further questions. In case of them, you can visit Slack. There's a community and it's still growing. It's Oro Slack is divided into subjects according to their products, and the community is pretty eager to answer questions, both our devs from Oro as well as partners and people that already ask questions and receive the answer. They're also keen on answering other questions of other people. So feel free to take part into on the Oro Slack. And yes. Thank you all for participating, and I hope that we'll meet soon again for another live session and another Oro Tech Talk.